Is Santa Marta Colombia safe? Hey, welcome to this video where the goal will be to answer that question for you. Now, I want to let you know that I'm answering that question for you based on my own experience living in Santa Marta for 2 months, and I lived there by myself. Now, I'm going to share with you the areas that I was in, and so you can get a better understanding of where I was and what I did, what you can expect with regards to whether it's safe or not. We're going to cover the weather, we're going to cover military, police, we're also going to cover affordability and any other things that come to mind. Now, with that being said, if you're considering going to Santa Marta and you want the short answer to whether Santa Marta is safe, my short answer would be yes. Santa Marta is quite close to Venezuela, and it's interesting when you get to Santa Marta how incredibly beautiful this city or town is. We'll call it maybe it's a city, but maybe it's a town, I don't know. Anyways, the weather in Santa Marta is incredible. If you want a lot of heat, that is going to be the place that you want to go to. Beautiful beaches, that is going to be the place that you want to go to. Now, it's also important that you know that there's a few different areas in Santa Marta. And so I'll share with you some of the areas and the area that I lived in so you can get a better understanding of what you can expect with regards to safety and everything else that's going on. So once you hit Santa Marta, the airport, if you fly to Santa Marta, okay? So if you fly, you're going to be at the airport. Right when you come out of the airport, you're already going to see the beach, even inside the airport. But that area, if you drive 10 to 15 minutes on the main road towards the center of Santa Marta, that is where I stayed. So it is not the busiest area where I stayed. I was 10 to 15 minutes from the airport, and then I was deeper in towards the mountains. I rented an apartment there. Now, I was, quite amongst the locals. In this apartment, there was, for example, if I go outside of the apartment, there was a dirt road. I could take that dirt road maybe like, I'm not too good with meters, but I could take that dirt road for maybe 10-minute walk, and I would hit another highway that was very close to the mountains where there was a lot of, traffic, people transporting stuff back and forth. If I took the dirt road the other way towards the ocean, it would be about same thing, maybe a 10-minute walk till I hit that main highway that connects the airport, and you could also go to the center of Santa Marta with that road as well. So without getting too complicated, that gives you a better idea of where I was. I was about 15-minute walk from the ocean, and I was about, let's say, 10-minute walk from that other highway that is very close to the mountains, okay? And 10 to 15 minutes from the airport towards the center of Santa Marta. That's a rough idea of the area where I was in. Now, let's say the area around me. The area around me was very local. So when I got outside of the apartment, there was like local houses. For example, right where I was actually was surrounded by nature, so it was quite quiet, other than maybe you have some barking dogs. And, the locals live, they have like little fences around their kind of, they lived in like, almost like a ranch land, and they were living there. So I was almost living in kind of a countryside area. It wasn't countryside, but it had that vibe. And then if I went a little bit further towards the ocean, that's when it became more like a town, vibe. And that's kind of where I was. So it was very small town vibe in the area where I was at. And if you go further towards the center of Santa Marta, it's a lot more busy, many more people there. Now, I went there a couple times, but I didn't live there, other than, let's say, I rented an apartment for a weekend for 2 to 3 nights where I stayed there in that area, and I went there a couple times during my stay, just during the day to visit the beach there, also, work at cafes, try out food at restaurants, etc. in that center area. But the majority of the time I was, like I said, 10 to 15 minutes from the airport and then deeper in towards the mountains. That's where I stayed, and that area is very quiet. Now, did I feel very safe there? I felt quite safe. I never had any problems whatsoever in Santa Marta. A couple times I was out and about filming a little bit of workout videos, doing my exercises where a couple people would come up to me and, they try to communicate with me, but my Spanish wasn't that great, so we would just, not be able to really communicate. And I'm not quite sure what they were, wanting to say, or if they were asking me something, I don't know. But for the most part, I felt quite safe. It never felt like a dangerous environment at all to me. And, I didn't really go out super, super late at night. So I do want to mention that. I don't know what it's like if you go out at night. But for the most part, I felt quite safe. I want to say I did go out when it was dark at times. It wasn't like I wasn't out the minute it hit dark. But for the most part, most of my time out was, during the day. Now, as far as the food goes in the area where I was, it was, if you go to a restaurant, it's relatively cheap. Like, you just need to have cash for the most part, and you can buy like an incredible meal for 2 to 3 Canadian dollars. As far as, let's say, the beach, I mean, the beach area where I was at, it was nice, but the ocean didn't feel as clean. And far out in the distance, there were ships. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I never really went into the ocean in that area because it just looked a little bit, not as clean, at least when I was there. The weather is like hot, and so you can expect that. The sand actually was quite hot when I went on the beach. That was very interesting how hot that felt. So you definitely got to go down to like the water area where the sand is cooler because of the water. Anyway, that was the area where I was in. That gives you a little bit of a better idea. I want to cover police before we hit the going to the center area of Santa Marta, because when I was in that area of Santa Marta, I actually got stopped by the police like 3 times. Now, granted, twice was it twice? No, I got stopped by the police twice. I said 3 times, but it was only twice. So twice, one time it was my fault, and the other time was just random. So, for example, one time they had the beaches closed, okay? So what happened was, this was the time it was my fault. At the time, they had only had the beaches open when I was in Santa Marta for 3 days of the week. This was with restrictions at the time, okay? So right now, as I'm filming this video, it's completely open, okay? It just so happened I'm just sharing a story with you when I was there. They had restrictions, so what would happen is you could go to the grocery stores every second or every third day. And the way they would do it is, if you have a certain number on the back of your ID card on, let's say for example, your number on your ID ends in 0. So certain days you could get into the store. Now I had 2 pieces of ID with with a driver's license and a passport, so I could get into the store 3 to 4 times a week. I could just use different IDs to get in, with the numbers. And so part of those restrictions, what they had is they had the beaches closed for 3 days of the week as well. And they would always close the beach at around 5 o'clock. Like if you were at the beach around 5 o'clock at night, the police would come through and tell everybody to get off the beach and close it. So what happened was, initially, I didn't know that there were restrictions. And so what I did was, I just went to the beach and I'm like, nobody here. Well, is this interesting? Why would nobody be here? Now, of course, I kind of knew, well, it's probably because the beach is closed, but I couldn't speak Spanish. I didn't let myself into what was going on, so I was not really aware of some of the things that were happening with regards to restrictions. So I just thought, well, okay, I'll just go onto the beach. And so I went onto the beach. And I was just there by myself, and after a while, in the distance, there was some officer that was like whistling his whistle and doing this with his hand, like get off the beach type of thing. And so I just was like, okay, I guess, it's time to go. And so I took my stuff and, I just ventured off the beach, and he must have called police to that area where I exited. So when I got off the beach, there was police there. There was 2 of them on a bike. And one of them was like, hey, can you show me your ID? And, I had my phone with me at the time, so thankfully I could use Google Translate to communicate with him. And he said, hey, the beach is closed, it's restricted, you're not allowed to be on here. And I said, hey, I'm sorry for being here. I didn't know, and I told him, hey, I don't really speak Spanish, and I didn't know that it was restricted. So, please forgive me. It's my mistake. And so he said something about, I would get fined or something. And I just said, hey, brother, like, I'm sorry. Like, I asked for your forgiveness for this. And I made it feel very sincere. And he just looked at the message, and then he said, okay. And he said, okay, just go. And so then I went. So I got out of that situation, no problem. That was my fault for doing that. Because, I wouldn't have gotten stopped by them if I hadn't gone to the beach when it was closed. Now, the second time, there was railroad tracks in close to the beach. And I was just literally walking on the railroad tracks. The railroad tracks, anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter where they are. You can take these railroad tracks, walk on them, whatever. There's no trains there. It just so happened that I was walking on these railroad tracks, and there's a dirt road, like, pretty much right next to them. And in Santa Marta at the time, they made it mandatory to wear masks. Now, not everybody was like, getting upset if you didn't wear a mask type of thing. And if you had this drink, of course, you could drink your water or whatever without wearing your mask. So I was walking with my water, and I was not wearing my mask. And I was walking on the train track, and these two police officers come in their bike, and they stop. And this one police officer comes to me, and he says, hey, why are you not wearing your mask? Again, I had my phone on me, so I could translate with him back and forth. So I told him, hey, I'm drinking my water, can't you see? And he said, we're going to fine you for not wearing a mask. And in that case, I don't know what state I was in at the time, but I just was in I don't really care type of state. And so I wasn't going to bother trying to say, hey, please don't do this or whatever. I just said, okay, whatever. And I just kind of did it in such a tone, and I had that facial expression of whatever, if you want to fine me for this, I don't care, whatever. And it was almost like I felt like it was ridiculous. And I just kind of expressed that. And I just accepted that he was going to fine me. And then he just pauses a little bit. And then he just waves and said, okay, go. And then I went on my way. So that was the only time. And again, that I don't know what his issue was with wanting to have me wear a mask. But that was, like I said, I had my water with me. I was drinking my water, etc. And that happened in that instance. Now, other than that, I had no issue with police. I also had no issue with any military personnel. In fact, I really didn't see any military personnel in Santa Marta. And with that said, I want to cover some of the things of if you go further to the center of Santa Marta before we wrap up this video. So if you're in Santa Marta, the area where I was in is more quiet, not as many people. But if you go further towards the center, maybe 20 to 30 minutes from the airport, it gets a lot busier. So I spent 3 to 4 days there. I said I rented an Airbnb a couple of nights, and then I also went there a couple times during my stay, visit the beach during the day, etc. Now, if you go to the beach on an open day at the time, it was very busy. It's much more lively, much more action going on in that area. So if you want a much more energetic, upbeat, lively, many things going on environment, maybe you want to consider going to the center. And, because I didn't really live there, I can't really touch on, too many things of how things are, the neighborhoods, etc. But I did feel quite safe there. There was nothing that ever really happened to me in any negative way. So give or take, if you're on the beach, you might have people trying to sell you a little bit more stuff there in that center area versus the area where I was in was much more relaxed. People weren't really trying to sell you stuff. And so that was kind of a fresh, I enjoyed that. I don't like too much when people try to constantly bombard you with selling you stuff on the beach. That's just for me. And in the center anywhere, there were a little bit more people there selling you stuff. Obviously, it makes sense. There's a lot more people there. But the one thing with the ocean in that area, I thought the ocean in the center, the water was much cleaner. And so actually there, I would go into the water and enjoy the ocean in that sense. Where I was in, I felt like it was a little bit dirtier. Okay, so if you go to the center, I would recommend going to the center, but you're probably going to pay a little bit more in the center. It might be a little bit more expensive in the center as to where I was at. And that will lead me to touching on affordability. The one thing I want to say before we get to affordability, if you go even further past the center, you'll hit an area called Taganga Bay. Now, that might be a separate area. It might not even be part of Santa Marta anymore. I wanted to go to Taganga Bay, but I never ended up making it, so I can't really comment on that area whatsoever. Now, in terms of affordability, the area that I was in is probably a little bit more affordable than if you go right to the center of Santa Marta. But I would say affordability-wise, when it comes to renting, it's probably similar to Medellin. That's kind of what my experience was. I would say Bogota is still cheaper than Santa Marta by a decent amount. I would say Bogota is maybe 20% cheaper rent-wise than Santa Marta. And maybe Santa Marta is comparable to Medellin, in my experience, at least when I was there. Now, there's not as many places available for rent in Santa Marta as in a place like Bogota or Medellin, so that's important to also consider, at least in my experience when I'm looking for places. And overall, I would say Santa Marta felt quite safe. I would say that, keep in mind, it's very hot there, so if you're going to rent something, I would highly, highly, highly advise you have air conditioning or you have a pool, some ways to cool down, because if you're going to spend a long time there, it gets difficult if you spend a long time in the heat and you don't have methods to cool off. Whether, of course, you can go in the ocean to cool off, you can have a pool maybe in your complex or apartment to cool off, but I would recommend having air conditioning because it's going to be, let's just say it's going to be very helpful if you can have that, okay? So overall, I would say Santa Marta is a beautiful place. I would recommend at least going to Santa Marta for a month at a time just to get to experience the area a little bit, give yourself enough time there. You will feel safe there. I can't comment too much on the nightlife. I never did go out in Santa Marta, especially at the time I was there. They had restrictions. So, I don't even know what was open and what wasn't open. I know that at 5 o'clock at night, they shut everything down at the time that I was there. So I never even bothered to go out at night. I stayed at the complex where I was at, and for the most part, we had a pool there. I had air conditioning in the house and in the apartment, and for the most part, I would just focus on doing my work and try to get good night's rest. And then during the daytime, I would adventure out more. I do want to say one last thing as I finish up this video. If you go to that highway in Santa Marta that is up against the mountains, at least in the area where I was at, I didn't go too far towards the center on that highway, but if you go on that highway, it's right up against the mountains. It's so beautiful. You can get beautiful views if you go on these highways. They have overpasses. If you go every couple miles, they have overpasses. And for example, I would go on that highway doing my runs. So in the morning or middays or end of days, I would go run maybe 1 mile one direction, and then they have this overpass, and I would go up on the overpass and you can see beautiful views. I would go the other direction. They have an overpass. You could go up on the overpass. You can see beautiful views. Anyways, that's just something that you can consider if you're in that area, because it can give you, an experience that's even away from the ocean or away from the beach amongst kind of the locals, and you're up against the mountains in a way that, I don't know, it's just a beautiful experience. So that's something that you can consider as well. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did and you haven't already, make sure you give it a thumbs up. It will be very helpful. And if you have any thoughts or questions, leave them in the comments for me below. I'll respond as quickly as I see them. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more videos that I will share with you based on my life experience related to travel and more. And finally, I have some offers for you in the description of this video below. Head to the description and check out all the unique offers that I have there for you and get access to any ones that you need and or want. Keep in mind that I will get a percentage if you do click on any of the links and you sign up. So I do appreciate you for clicking any links and taking any offers that are relevant to you that you need and or want. So, through that way, you also support me, and I appreciate that. So thank you so much. Thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate you. Let's go.